Welcome back to the EPCC TV Chef Share Sessions done in conjunction with El Paso Community College Culinary Arts. As always, I'm Chef Rosser back with you today, and today we are going to be looking at sausage making, just the basics of sausage making. We're going to take some pork shoulder and a spice mix, and we're going to stuff sausage. We'll go through it A to Z. Hope you enjoy the show. As always, like, share, and give us your suggestions about future videos. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoy the show. All right, so let's get started. For sausage making, like I told you earlier, we can use different proteins, but we're gonna start with just the traditional pork. You see all kinds of sausages on the market these days, whether they are protein-based or plant-based. We do get to see a lot of different products on the market, especially the new plant-based products that are coming onto the market. And really what that is just sausage making techniques. There is a lot more science in the plant-based items, but we're gonna look at it very simply from a classical point of view. The cut of meat that we're gonna be using today is a pork shoulder. We use the pork shoulder for a couple of reasons. One, it's relatively inexpensive. This was about $1.70 a pound, $1.60 something a pound. But more importantly, because of the marbling, the intramuscular and fat cap on here make it ideal for sausage production. And what we want is a ratio somewhere between 50-50 of lean to fat, all the way up to about 70-30. You need to have a lot of fat in sausage in order for it to stay moist and juicy during the cooking process. So we'll go through that, and one of the things that we're going to do after we cut this butcher down this pork shoulder and grind it is we're going to emulsify the sausage. We want to work the fat into the product even more so than it is now in order to make sure that we get a really nice product. There's nothing worse than a dry, crumbly sausage, right? So let's go ahead and get started. This pork shoulder weighs about 6.5 pounds. It does have a bone in it, and it is the blade bone. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to butcher that down very easily. What I do is I put the fat cap side down on my cutting board. I have a pan full of ice here to keep my meat nice and cold. For this process, everything needs to be really nice and cold. I'm gonna find where my two bones join and go in from that corner and cut on the bottom. Just the flat side of that bone, I'm just gonna take the meat off, expose that bone. I'm gonna try not to get any heavy cartilage in there from around the shoulder blade. Nobody likes that gristly sausage. So after I expose the bone, I can just take this whole blade bone off. I can put my meat on ice and just work to get the rest of the usable meat off of here. Now this bone has got a little bit of a funky shape to it, so you just got to be careful when you're cleaning it off. Just use a sharp knife. A very sharp knife is super important, and you're just going to do little swiping cuts with the tip of your boning knife. And I'm going to come all around that bone. And then there is a little hump in the bone, and I'm just going to let my knife follow that bone all the way up. There's one good chunk, and then I just have to come in here and get the rest off of the other side. I'm just going to come in from the top, and it's just a real simple kind of scooping cut. And I want to get as much usable meat off of this as possible, because all of that heavy connective tissue in there and any fat and gristle, it grinds up perfectly. So that is the bone. You can save these for stock making. They make a wonderful addition to a stock or a soup. So we're going to set that aside for later. All right. So as far as the cuts, you can dice it about 1 inch to 2 inches wide. And really, this just needs to be big enough to fit into your grinder. Now the hole in the grinder is about 2 inches wide, so that'll fit perfectly in there. I'm going to start putting this in my bowl for weight. I have a spice mix here measured out for a 5-pound batch. So we'll get to that in a minute. I'm just going to continue dicing this for you guys real quickly. And then I'll weigh it out, and then we'll season this, and we'll get it in the freezer. After we season it, we want to put it in the freezer for a time in order to chill everything down, let those spices start penetrating the meat and doing their job, and then we'll grind it. We'll go through the emulsification process, and we'll stuff it. Just nice big chunks. And if you have a sharp knife, it is so much easier to do this kind of work. It goes really fast. And like I said, this doesn't have to be perfect. You just need it to fit into your grinder. And that's it. A real quick and easy fabrication on that guy. We're going to set this over here. We're going to put our pan just to make sure that we are getting a correct weight. And weigh out 5 pounds, anything extra I will set aside. I want to make sure to get all that nice heavy fat in there as well. All right, there we go. We got 5 pounds. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my spice mix on here. And this is an andouille spice mix. You can find different spice mixes depending on the sausage preparation. They're very easy to make, and they can be super simple. The primary ingredient in here is salt. But for andouille, we've got a little red spice in there, paprika, cayenne, give it a little heat. This has some garlic powder, some onion powder, and there's a little milk powder in here as well. And what the milk powder is going to do is it's going to add some lactic acid into the sausage, so you get that tangy flavor profile. This is one of my favorite sausage blends. We're just going to dump all of this on there, and it looks like a lot, but this honestly needs a lot of seasoning, especially with the processing that we're doing. So we're going to get this all mixed up in here. We're going to throw it in the freezer for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we're going to bring it out and grind it. After we grind it, we're going to put it on the mixer with some ice in order to emulsify the sausage, and then we're going to go ahead and stuff it. But we need to, at some point in the process, and it's going to be after we mix it, we're going to do a tester. So we'll fry up a little patty of this just to taste the flavor, see if it needs any adjusting, salt, what have you, and then we'll make any adjustments as necessary, and then we'll stuff this into our hog casing, and we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so we'll be back shortly, and we'll go through the grinding process. Okay, so we've got our grinder out, and before we put our meat through it, we need to assemble this piece of machinery. Now, it's really important that all of this stuff stays very cold during production. So what I do ahead of assembly is I put all these parts in the freezer, with the exception of the motor base here, and get them nice and chilled down. So I've put this manifold on here. I've got my feeder tray here. This is the auger. I need to get this into the gear housing, right? Next is the blade and the die. So the blade has a curved side and the blade has a flat side. And it's really important that the flat side comes in contact with the face of the die, which is going to actually be doing the cutting and the extruding. Now you can find different sizes of dies. This is a rather coarse die. for andouille sausage. I like it rather coarse, but we could do it smaller or larger depending on what our needs are. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in. The blade, the cutting face needs to be facing out. We're gonna put our die in, and it's got a little notch in the bottom that sits in the housing so that it doesn't spin while this thing is running. We're gonna get our faceplate screwed on and tighten this thing down really nice and tight. Make sure everything's tight and in place. Next, we're gonna grind our meat. So I have an ice pan here to catch the product. I'm gonna put a piece of plastic over the face of this to help with two things. One, to help guide the grind downwards and help keep it from splashing on me. So we'll get that started and then we'll run our meat through. We'll be right back. Okay, so our meat is out of the freezer. It's nice and cold. Our grinder's put together properly, and I've got that plastic drape coming over the extruder. So I'm gonna go ahead and dump all of this in there and put my catch pan back down in the ice. I wanna go ahead and fill the feeder tube with meat before I turn this on. I don't want it running empty. And then go ahead and switch on. And it's this easy. And now if you're grinding twice, the first grind is gonna be really easy. The second one's a lot more work. We're only gonna be doing one grind with this, so it feeds fairly easily. We can use a feeder tube pusher. You never wanna put anything other than what comes with the equipment down in there, especially fingers. It will do a number on anything that goes down there. This is a very powerful machine. Even the little ones that you hook up to a stand mixer can do some damage. So just be very careful when you're operating these, right? All right, and we're just gonna wait for that to slow down. And that is it. We'll go ahead and pull our plastic drape off, get everything off of the machine. This machine's ready to break down and clean and use again at this point. Now, I want you to notice that this grind is fairly coarse, which will make a nice rustic sausage, but we are gonna put this on the mixer in order to help the emulsification process. So that's what we're gonna do next. But this nice coarse grind is gonna give a wonderful texture. It's gonna have some bite to it. It's not gonna be very soft, which is exactly what we're gonna look for out of this, especially if we're going to cold smoke this later on, which is traditionally done with andouille. Now cold smoking is a whole different process from what we're doing because we need to hang these to dry, and we'll get to all of those steps shortly. We are not going to go through the cold smoking process because this won't be ready for it today. This needs to dry overnight, hung in the refrigerator in order to form the pellicle so that the smoke will adhere to it and to dry out the sausage casings. Okay, we'll be right back to go ahead and go through the mixing of this product, and then we'll jump into the casing. So the next step in the process with our sausage making is the emulsification process. So we showed you the grind already, and it's got a very coarse texture to it, and we can see the marbling in there still, which is great. However, we need to get that fat a little bit more incorporated. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this into our stand mixer bowl. And always keeping this product super cold at all times is very important. And one of the ingredients that I'm gonna use for emulsification is ice. So I got about a cup of ice here, and I'm just gonna put that in there, and I'm gonna mix this on very low speed for about a minute, and then I'm gonna turn it up for about 15 to 30 seconds, just until this turns into a very tacky mass, and it's a lot more homogeneous looking. So get this paddle on there, put our bowl up, and we'll do 1 minute at this low speed to help melt the ice, cool the mixture down, and emulsify the fat into this product, okay? So we'll come back in a minute and look at this, and then we'll turn the speed up just to finish. And then we're gonna do a tester. All right, our sausage has been going for about a minute. Let's stop the mixer and lower the bowl and take a look at it. You can tell that it has come together. It's a lot more homogeneous looking. Just because of the coarse nature of the grind, it's never gonna look 100% mixed, but it's just about where we want it. Most of that ice has melted. I'm just gonna scrape down a little bit, and then I'm gonna put this on speed 2 for about 15 to 30 seconds, just to get everything nice and homogeneous. And then we're gonna do a tester. All right. We wanna be very careful not to overmix this, because the meat can become tough and rubbery. We overdevelop a protein called myelin, which will make this become very rubbery. So we want to be very careful not to do that. And this sausage looks about right. Okay. Now I can drop this and get everything scraped down. We've got a really nice looking mix here. I'm going to go ahead and clean off the mixer. And that is our sausage mixture. And I can tell the emulsification has happened because that those big chunks of fat have streaked out into the meat. You have much more homogeneous look to it. And at this point, we're ready to do the tester. So let me get this back into my ice pan while we're heating up a saute pan, so we can check this for seasoning levels. We're just gonna cook off a little patty of it to ensure that the seasoning is correct, and we don't need to add anything to this. You get a lot of connective tissue building up in here that kind of sticks to the paddle. Don't worry about it. Just pull it off. It's perfect to have in the sausage. It brings a lot of flavor and texture into it, especially once this dries a little bit. And the drying is a hugely important part of the process in order to make this sausage palatable. All right, so we'll get this back in our pan, and we'll heat up our saute pan, check our seasoning levels. Any little ice chips that are still left, don't worry about them. They're gonna melt. And we want to add that little bit of moisture back into that, and it helps tremendously with the emulsification process. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on our tester. We've got our small saute pan hot. I've got a little cooking fat here, and I'm going to go ahead and get my patty in there. And I don't want this pan too hot. I don't want to get too much color on this because it'll taste too seasoned. So I just want to cook this nice and slowly, keep it moving in the pan, make sure it doesn't stick. Flip it over. We'll get it to 165 degrees interior temperature, and we'll check that with our thermometer. And then we're going to taste it for our seasoning. That's the really important part about this. If I cook this too fast or too hot, it's going to taste over seasoned. So this needs to be a fairly gentle cook, and keep it moving so it doesn't stick. This is just for testing purposes. So we'll come back and we'll take a look at this. Once it's cooked, we'll check the seasoning and make any necessary adjustments. So let's go ahead and temp our meat and make sure that it's at the proper internal temperature. That's climbing up. We'll give this just another minute, and then we'll taste it for seasoning. Okay, so our patty is cooked. It's at the proper internal temperature. We're gonna go ahead and taste it for seasoning. Nicely cooked interior, looks and smells great. That's good sausage. Let's go ahead and case this next. We'll be right back. All right, so the last step in this process is going to be casing our sausages. So this is part of the sausage casing machine, and it's a real simple hand crank apparatus that's just going to force the sausage out of this hopper through this feeder horn and into our casings. Now the casings we've selected for today's objectives are hog casings, and these are commercially available. These can be really, really long, and you want them longer. Longer the better, because that way you can get more sausage done. Now with a small batch like this, we don't need a whole lot, but it's good to have the proper casings. So hog casings are going to give you that kind of bratwurst, 1.5 inch diameter that you're looking for. If you wanted something skinnier like a breakfast sausage type, you would go with a sheep casing. And if you wanted something really big, kind of like a salami, you'd probably go with a beef casing. They come from all parts of the digestive tract. They're cleaned very well and perfectly safe and edible. That's why I like these, because you can eat them and you don't have to peel them off. All right, so before we get our meat in the hopper, I'm going to spray the inside of this thing out with just a little vegetable oil, just to provide a little bit of lubrication for the crank process. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. We're going to go ahead and pack our meat into the hopper. And we want to try to get any air bubbles out of there. So we need to pack it down in there very firmly. Get our ice pan out of here. All right. So I'm going to use the back of my hand to push out any air bubbles, get a nice solid mass down in there, nice and flat. You don't want air bubbles in your sausage. If you have them in there, you got to get them out, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. And this is probably one of my favorite parts of doing this, because you get to see the finished product. So that's all nicely packed down in there. Now we're going to slide this onto our press. I need to come up with that just a bit. And I'm going to start sliding this down just till I touch the top of the product, and then I'll show you how to use those casings. I've got my finger in the feeder tube so that I can feel when the meat gets close to the end of the nozzle, so I don't start pushing the meat out before I need it. Just nice and slow. All right. Get that. Start pushing that product out. And as soon as it touches my finger, I'm going to pull back on the crank so I can put my casing onto the feeder tube. There we go. Okay. All right, so the next thing we need, other than the casings, is clean cold water. And I'm just going to get that all over this sheet pan. And this rimmed sheet pan really helps with keeping everything clean. Right, I'm going to come in here and get my casing. These have already been rinsed and they're ready to use. And you can see this guy is pretty long, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to do this whole batch, but we'll find out. All right, so I'm going to get my feeder tube nice and wet. I'm going to slide my casing on over it and just feed that on there like that. You can be really careful when you're doing this. If there's a twist in the casing, you want to work that out, because what it can do is disrupt the finished product. It'll try to put that twist into your finished sausage. So I'm going to pull this all the way back. All right. And there I've got just a couple inches down on the front, and I'm going to tie a real simple bubble knot into here. And with everything so slippery, it takes a couple tries sometimes. There we go. Pull that back. Tighten up my knot. I've got a little overhang here, and that's not a big deal. So the next thing to do is start extruding the sausage, right? So make sure that that the casing is gonna slide very well on the feeder tube. One hand I'm using to crank, and the other one I'm using to check how tightly the sausage is packed in there. I don't want it too loose, but I don't want it too tight. So I'm gonna hold back the casing that I'm allowing out, and we'll stop this right now and take a look. We want it filled enough to be able to hold its shape, but not so tight that I can't form a link in that, because that's what we're going to do next. So these two fingers will let the casing out, and these two fingers in the front check for the tautness or the filling of that casing. All right, we're just going to keep going really quickly. This is a pretty fast process. Takes a little getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. And I'm going to show you a very easy way to help keep you kind of organized. I just start coiling this guy up. And checking for my fill. Coil that up, and I'm going to run out of casing. So at this point, I'm going to kind of back off on this, and because I need to be able to tie my knot, I'm going to cut that and just tie my second bubble knot back here. And it should be a little easier without it on the horn. But I didn't leave myself enough room. Try to work some of this stuff down so I get a little more casing. There we go. My knot set. Kind of even everything out as far as the distribution of the product in there. And we'll come back and we'll case this shortly. But for demonstration purposes, you see how the water helps everything slide around. It's great because next what I want to do is make links. So I'm going to start by uncoiling this. I'm going to coil it the other way, and I'm going to show you how to make links. All right. So I've got some marks at 6 inches on my sheet pan, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the sausage into the corner, and at 6 inches, which is about a sausage length, I'm going to pinch and throw the loop forward 3 times. 1, 2, 3. All right. Then I'm going to do every other length, every other one. So the last one becomes the first one, and at my 6 inch mark, pinch, throw my loop forward 3 times, and keep coiling. Pretty simple, straightforward process. 2 and 3. That one felt a little tight, so I need to be a little delicate with that. So I love making sausages. This is one of the easiest things to do. It can be very intimidating the first time you do it, but it's a really fun process. And our last one. Now, because these are natural casings, our last link is going to be a little short. We got a little stumpy one, and that's fine. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So there's our andouille sausage links. What I need to point out to you guys at this point is there's a few air bubbles in there, and I just get a pin and prick the sausage casing. I make sure that the pin is cleaned and sterilized so I don't introduce any bacteria into this. I'm going to prick these holes and let that air out. And then I'm going to hang these sausages to dry for at least a day or 2 in the refrigerator. What that's going to do is allow these casings to dry and the air to expel from the interior of here. It's also going to allow you to cut between the links. Where that casing twists will dry, and then you can cut between them in order to separate the links without all of the product squirting out. So that's really important to hang these to dry. After they're dried in there for a day or two, we'll be taking these out and we'll be applying a cold smoke to them. And cold smoking is just a really simple process where we're kind of putting these in a smoky environment that is not hot. We're using smoke to season the exterior of these, deliver some flavor. These natural casings are permeable to the smoke, so that flavor gets inside there as well. You get a great product. On Dewey sausage, you got a nice grain in there. You see all the marbling in there, the fat in there. That's what makes this such a great product to make. Super simple. I hope you guys enjoyed this demo, and we'll try sausage making at home. Now you can buy most of this product fairly inexpensive as far as the equipment. You can get a grinder attachment for a KitchenAid for under $100, and you can also get a sausage casing attachment for less than that, or you can get one of these big press types at an outdoor store like Cabela's for about $100, about half of this size. So try sausage making at home, especially if you're into grilling and barbecuing. This is one of my favorite things to do on the weekend. Hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and as always, share our videos, like us, follow us, and give us suggestions for your next set of videos. Take care, and we'll see you next time.